so delighted to be back this Wednesday afternoon on MidWeek Vibes. And last week I had an amazing discussion with our panelists, Vera and Alex, and I want to welcome you back.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Karibuni sana. It's so nice to have you back. And I want to welcome to all of you as we listen a little bit more about common sense. And last week, if you remember, is that I think it's Vela who taught us that we need to develop a relationship with money. And I wondered, what kind of relationship do we need? Vela, please, if you could comment on that a little bit.
Wow, okay. Good afternoon, Mamlaka. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back, and thank you for having us today. So what sort of relationship should we have with money? There's sort of relationship where we are the masters and the money is our servant. Definitely is a good one, where at least we are the ones who are actually managing the money, and where we can actually be good stewards in terms of how we manage that money. And it's not the other way around, where money is the one that's controlling us and telling us what it, like it's speaking to us. We are the ones who should be directing it on where really ultimately it should go, and to find the right pockets where it should go.
Thank you so much. And I don't want to forget to welcome Charity.
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
she's going to be co-hosting with me,
Thank you.
and that's lovely as usual. One other thing we learned before we continue is that we need to adopt a very flexible and agile attitude towards money. Alex, you let us help us remember that.
Yes. At the end of the day, what you're looking for is an income. Everything else you're doing is an activity to generate the income. So if today the activity I am doing is, I am in hospitality, tomorrow I could be in delivery. I could be in another activity, and it helps me generate the income. So it's important to have that very clear agility, but also to communicate that you have changed your activity to those who are near and dear to you. Because if you are doing a day job, which required you are doing a hospitality during the day, and then in the evening you have to do deliveries, it's good to sit on the table of gentlemen, which is your family, and communicate that from now on I'm doing some evening deliveries, so that your activity is always aligned to your family's interest. They are aware what you're doing. That is very critical.
Wow, I like that. I really like that, and I hope you can remember that, the gentleman around our money matters is our family first and foremost, the coolest. That's very nice. Today we want to focus on borrowing. I don't know whether you're excited as I am, but I am very excited to learn about borrowing. And I don't know whether you guys borrow money. We all borrow money. We like to use money. And sometimes we're wondering, where could we find money? So our amazing panelists are going to help us discuss a little bit about borrowing money. Let me start us off by the story that we find in, I think it was in, Shakespeare has a book called The Merchant of Venice, remember? And in that Merchant of Venice text, there is a guy who borrows money, and is a lender. The lender is called Shylock. And Shylock lends money to this guy. His name starts with a B. It's a long story, times in that story. And then he lends the money, and Antonio is actually the guarantor. And the agreement is that if this guy doesn't pay within 3 months, which is the requisite period they set aside, is that Shylock will require a piece of flesh from Antonio or the money. So borrowing sounds like it can be a tricky issue. There could be a few things we may need to understand as borrowers so that we can borrow in a healthy way. So let us explore those areas of borrowing. And first of all, you tell us, help us understand what is borrowing, where can we borrow, and how should we borrow? Yeah.
Okay, I'll take the question on what is borrowing. Borrowing is essentially getting capital or some funds from somebody who has extra for a period of time for you to execute a certain activity which your own capital would not have allowed you to be able to achieve. And I have to say, hopefully, through various activities, you are able to repay the lender. So you are the borrower, you are the one who's been given. The one who's giving is the lender. And the lender expects that through whatever activities you're going to do, you're going to sort yourself and sort me out. So you're going to pay me with some agreed interest, extra value from whatever I gave you, because I would have been putting it somewhere else. But since you're the one who wants it, I will give you cost-benefit analysis. I think it will benefit me more to give you. So I lend to you, but I expect it back. And for me as a borrower, I always have in mind that whatever I want to do with the money which I've borrowed, or rather which I've been given for a short period and I have to pay back, I always hope I will do something with it which is of more value than what I need to pay the lender back. That is the core construct of borrowing, that I will be given something, I will make more with it, and then I will be able, out of the more, to give back and to be left with something. That is the core construct of borrowing. Now, in terms of what features are there, I think what I'm describing is the best scenario
Certainly is.
for an investment lending, where I am doing, you know, what you call a leverage scenario. I am going to make more. A lot of the information that we have says borrow to buy this table. That means take it, and hopefully when you buy the table, you will know how to pay back. Now, it expects that you are a disciplined borrower, that you know that when you borrow, I have somewhere else another line of income other than this table that will pay back whatever I borrowed over time, maybe over a longer time. Is it necessarily a good thing? Maybe Vera has also a point to look at for borrowing and whether it's a good thing to do it.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So even let me start with your other question, was where do most people borrow? And I would say most people tend to borrow from, first and foremost, friends and family, the angel investors or the angel. So friends and family are the first place, a port of call when it comes to borrowing. That's very, very common. And then in a more formal setting, we have now the banks, we've got the SACCOs, we've got the microfinance institutions. And in addition to that, for companies, you'll see where they actually even borrow from now some sort of, do I say private equity or some sort of companies, from companies. So there's all these different opportunities for us to be able to borrow. So, and even more so recently is the digital lending. So where we're finding people borrowing from either platforms which have been set up, the Fulizas of this world, the branches, and many other sort of digital lending opportunities. Tala and all the others are there following suit. But is it a good thing in terms of borrowing, to Alex's question? Well, if it is for the furniture, definitely it makes, that is not the sort of lending that we want to get engaged, to advocate, where we actually are borrowing for our own consumption. And yet these are things that we would have budgeted and actually saved up for them. We can buy our furniture, even a few months down the line, we will still be okay. That TV can be bought a few months down the line, where we can delay in terms of the spending and be able to actually save up towards that. So that's not the sort of borrowing that we want to encourage. The sort of borrowing that we would want to encourage is the one that now Alex was mentioning, where you're actually borrowing for the sort of activity that can enable you to generate an income to be able to repay to the to now the person who has lent you the money. That's a sort of borrowing. Some good, where it's some form of leverage, where you use that sort of that money to actually increase your income streams. So that's the sort of borrowing that we would want to encourage, and not consumption borrowing.
Yeah, before Charity asks a question, which I'm sure you're going to ask, is there any data or in your experience in the money industry to show how many people will actually go for consumption borrowing as opposed to investment borrowing? Is there some, is that a fair question?
Well, there would, so you'll have a harder time breaking that down. But what we would say is there are very many loans in the market, but when you look at what people would be investing in, let's say properties and those kind of things, there is data to that effect.
Okay.
If you look at mortgages in the formal space, banks and that kind of space, you're talking of maybe anywhere sub $1 million. Actually, in the top tier banks, you're talking about 300 to 500,000 max in loans.
Right.
That means those people who would qualify for a long-term loan, which is an investment loan because the mortgage is within the confines of investing, would be somewhere around 500,000 to $1 million. Now, however, when you look at the smaller borrowings, we are talking 10 million plus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so a lot of people borrow to do short-term issues. I borrow to pay my rent, then I pay easier. Then those kind of smaller numbers are very many. The 50,000 range, there are very many borrowers around that area. If you are to say what are they doing, it may not be immediately clear because some people are doing it because they are doing the mama mboga strategy.
Yeah.
So you have not beaten it down to what are they exactly doing. But the SME sector has a lot of people participating in the smaller loans to be able to do the businesses. I bought a boda, I'm paying. So there's a lot of people there, but the ones which are known formally are those who are the 500 to about $1 million who can borrow to do some longer term investment.
To long-term invest.
Yes.
Wow, that
In
is
a
very good.
population, obviously, of 50 million. Or thereabout.
About.
Yes.
Wow. So the access is there, certainly. That's what you're saying. Access is there. Uptake is also an issue there.
Yes.
But that worries me. Or maybe it could be a reflection of our economy. I don't think I don't want us to go there. But if majority are borrowing for immediate use, that's an indicator that we really are not there where we can borrow for long-term investment. We're still confined with our bread and butter. We are dealing with food, shelter, and clothing, the basics. We're still at the basics as an economy.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn before, people have the clarity. In life you start with what is at your basic level, is bread and butter, as you're saying.
Right.
So that is what people are trying to address at this point. However, as the education, as you're doing now, filters in and people start thinking and they become aware that actually I should look for a trade, an activity that can be funded. I think in our last conversation we said banks have a lot of capital. In fact, if you organized yourself to be a good borrower, you would find that the sky is the limit. But then we are in a hurry, even when we are given a little, we consume in a way that it will not produce. So the number of people who can borrow and produce, that's the ratio we need to increase.
To increase.
And it will be a great country. It is a great trajectory when you can do that.
And that's my prayer, Charity,
Yes.
that by the end of our session, we have increased that ratio. That our people will have become more educated about the opportunities for borrowing and how to identify those types of streams of income or a trade that people can engage in so they can become good borrowers and improve their financial status.
Yes,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a question. I'm representing the young adult or someone who's just gotten a job, and they're probably getting 30 to 50 as a first starting salary. And you've mentioned about 1 million to 500. At that time, you don't have that money. And if you go to the banks, because they are accessible, and that's where our salaries are going to, you'd want to take a loan of probably, say, 100,000. But we know the banks, immediately you take the loan, the interest is cut towards. If it's 2 weeks from the end of the month, it will just be somehow. It's so immediate. But what are some of the short-term investments that you can advise this kind of person to take, as opposed to what institutions would you advise this young person to partake?
This is for investment purposes.
Yes.
What they would be doing with the money in the short term.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, they need, before they go and decide to get into an activity, you need to check whether it is aligned to your knowledge, expertise, passion. Is there enough market? Do you understand the market cycle of whatever you are taking action in? Now, today I was watching a movie, I think a very short clip which has been done about Ambani. Ambani is maybe India's wealthiest magnate, and they have captured how a gentleman started from selling bottles for recycling. This is his story. Started from selling bottles for recycling at a very low capital. Because one of the things that you have mentioned is that the person is fairly young.
Yes.
You know, every time look at what resource do you have. You may have little capital, but you have energy and time, which means you can start small and grow. And that patience is what is necessary to grow, because when you look at his story, he started from selling bottles, which incidentally were because his uncle who he lived with used to drink. So he used to take the bottles that the guy drinks and he goes to sell them until he bought a bicycle to deliver milk. And from milk he's able, so the activities you can start doing are those that don't require heavy capital, but may require some energy and somebody who has time.
Passion as well.
When I was younger, we sold tires, you know, second-hand tires to the guys who made akala. Right? We sold newspapers. We delivered, you know, I sold rabbits and I did all these things. The capital requirement was so low, much as I didn't even have it at the time. I was borrowing from, you know, goodwill of the person, you know. Those are kind of things you can get into the space with. Over time, you start broadening your market. And that time the bank or the lender has seen some cash flow in your account. And build it slowly. The thing is, don't try to do it quickly, because then you utajikwa, you know, mwenda pole hajikwai. So if you go too fast, you are going to trip yourself.
Yeah, true.
So there are various activities, and at the micro level that you can do. Who delivers in your area? What is being delivered? I like the guys who do, you know, all these Glovo deliveries. The guys who are also doing salons, and you can do even salons at a micro level. You can do makeup at a micro level. You can do various things at a micro level that require 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, which, you know, all these micro loans can sort you out. But then with the idea that the cash must pass through a formal institution who 6 months after evaluating your cash flow will even be ready to listen to you.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And give you a step, a leg up.
Amazing.
Wow,
Amazing.
that is super, isn't it?
It
Yeah?
is,
So
it
there's
is,
hope
yeah.
for young people. With what they have, they can do something. And I like the way, Alex, you pointed to a couple of things. And one of the key things about young people is energy.
Yeah.
They have energy, but also they have a skill. It seems like you're referring to a person with a skill to sell something, who can sell a service or a commodity, isn't it? Yeah, and then they can get something.
Yes, and even just to add to what Charity asked, you see, this young person who's getting that 30,000 per month, they want to go to the bank to borrow that 100,000.
Yes.
But if this young person actually started saving even 20% or even 30% of their salary, let's say even that 9,000, if they get into that savings culture where they save up 9,000 per month, in 12 months, they will even have, saved up that amount of money that they're going to the bank to.
Possibly
Because
going
they
to borrow,
what,
yeah.
about 9,000 times 12, that's about 98,
108.
108, 100. So they'll have even much more than what they were going to the bank. So if they were just a little bit more patient and got
is
into a savings
key.
culture, they will even be able to build up that capital capital without even having to go to the bank. But what happens in most instances is that for us, there's a sense of urgency. You remember what we talked about the instant
Yes.
gratification where we
Yeah,
want the
microwave,
100,000
yeah.
now. And we are not willing to wait for those 12 months to build up to 108,000 and be able to fund whatever it is that we wanted to do, whether it is a business or whether it was whatever it is we were taking that 100,000 for. So what I would encourage the young person is, please just be a little bit more patient. You know, maybe reduce on whatever expenses and build up. You know, save every month a certain amount of money and it adds up. You know, kidogo kidogo hujaza kibaba. A little, a little.
Yeah.
A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So just get into that good discipline of saving. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Isn't
Thank
that
you
cool?
for that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That culture. And last time you talked about discipline.
Yeah.
That relationship with money needs to come with discipline so that we can know that we can set aside something
Yes.
regularly, on a regular basis.
Yes.
Wow, that's really nice. I just wanted us to touch a little bit about security. So, because borrowing, there are many forms of borrowing, like you shared, and there are many places you could borrow.
Yes.
But there are some securities needed.
Yeah.
And in the history of our country, we have had people complain that I borrowed and my security was my house, and I no longer have a home. Or my parents' home went like that.
Yeah.
Or my brother borrowed against our home, and home went. Or my dad borrowed against the property where we live in, and now the property is gone. What would you advise around the area of borrowing and security for that money that we borrow?
Well, so every coin has two sides. There is you, who's a borrower, who is considered to have the knowledge and capacity to work the money you have been lent and be able to pay back to the lender. Now you need to think of who is the lender. The lender is a bank. The lender is an individual who has also worked for their own money and has now given it to you. And at the end of the day, even the lender has to account to somebody as to, so you gave so and so our money. If they don't pay, what will happen? Now, whoever is the lender has worked out the reality that markets have cycles. And therefore, it is likely that at some point, you may default. In fact, most people borrow with the thought that they would never default. But they forget that market cycles are such that there will be times markets are down. COVID has taught us this. And at that point, your activity could be impacted. And
That's true.
you then need to go and talk to the institution to renegotiate repayment. But this is a unique circumstance, COVID. So, you know, the central bank and everybody have agreed to renegotiate because even the shareholders will understand it's not your default or through incompetence, which is the problem. It's a market cycle. Now, what they are normally looking at, the lender, is that in the event, whatever you, because when you're borrowing, you make so many covenants. You swear from here to wherever that I will pay, I will pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're optimistic you're going to pay. And in fact, they know some will pay, some will not, because of those market cycles. So what the lender is looking for is that generally, given the securities I receive, should be much more than the money I have paid out, because in the event this crowd defaults, I will still be able to sell whatever securities we have to pay back my shareholders. When you go borrow money, first of all, know that that is in the mind of the lender, that you are likely to default, not of your own, but even market and business cycle. So once you have that clarity in mind, then you think whether utawekelea plot ya family. Because you are very clear that it is likely it can happen.
Let me ask you, to go through that very slowly because
Yes.
the thinking about the lender
Yes.
is usually not the thought we have when we are borrowing.
No.
We're thinking about ourselves and
Yes.
we're thinking about what we want to get from the
Our
bank.
needs.
So let's get that clear for our audience, for our congregation,
Yes.
so that when we go to borrow, we have this at the back of our minds. We think about what the lender is thinking even before I sign the loan application form.
That is very important because there are things they are looking for. When I give you a loan, for example, for a house, I must think, what's the value of that house? In the event you default, can I sell it and get back my shareholders' money?
Yes.
Anytime, if I lend you against your car, you know, is this a car that I can sell? So you'll find that maybe they lend to you maximum 50% of the value of the car. It's not because they're gangsters. It's because at the end of the day, if he has to sell the vehicle
Yeah.
and he has to sell quickly before he posts something we call non-performing loans, and he's told that he has to write that off his profit. Remember, if you default, the lender has to write off your default against
Yeah.
his own
Your
profit.
profit, yeah.
He's not happy to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you get the manager slashed for doing those kind of things.
Yes.
So to protect himself, herself, what they make sure is that the loan I've given you, the asset is more than able to cover
Yes.
if you default. So
Yeah.
that if the car is worth $1 million, I've given you 500,000. If you default, if I put it in the market and I said 750,000,
Yeah.
there will be a queue here
Yes.
to buy the vehicle. Now, si kwa madharau, you know, a lot of people, okay, there is instances where people argue, no, these guys are crafty. But the reality is at the end of the day, the lender's manager has to account for what they did with the money. So once we put away the lender there and his shareholders and those kind of things, you also have to, and I'm happy that you have this conversation, that you who's borrowing also has to have done your calculations very carefully. And don't be in a hurry. And that's why Vera insists, because of the experience we see, you are better off saving because of the market cycles. We've been in that space where, you know, you did all the research you could in this world about a project. And thank God we did not borrow against that space. But the money still went. Despite our
Yeah.
attention,
Yes.
it still went down.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson, masters of some level, which you cannot believe.
Learning curve.
The learning curve,
And you can't learn this in school.
you couldn't.
This life,
Yes.
life school teaches you this.
So when you're borrowing, pay in mind that the lender also is trying to cover themselves. And you as a borrower, you must know that the market cycles are such that it is possible that whatever I'm borrowing for, even a good investment, is not able to pay. Therefore, if you are the one in the lender's shoes, knowing the market is likely to even let you down, even the guy could be smart.
Yeah.
What would you do to make sure you're not fired? You would have to take a security. And the security you take, the easier it is to convert to money, the less of a security you need. Let me explain. If you have a plot in, today it's a great place to be in Turkana. You know, that used to be what we call a loan to value. You find maybe, hey, takupatia 30% of the value of that plot.
Right,
Because by the time we find a buyer, it will take us a while. So the maximum I can give you if it's valued at $1 million is probably 300,000. I can take it as a security for 300,000. But if your plot is next to State House, we are talking of loan to value 80, 85,
Yeah.
right? So the plot is therefore, you know, attractive. More so if it has a development that is generating an income.
Yes.
Or let's say if it was a car, it's a car that can be sold quickly to another Uber guy. Iyo gari there, I can give you a very quick loan against that. But if it's
marketable.
an asset which will take a while to get a buyer, then we are not happy. Now, there is also cash. There are people who take cash as a cover for you to borrow. So cash is 100%. If you want to borrow against your
My
money,
cash.
yes,
But a minute. Wait a minute. I have cash and I still want to borrow.
yes.
Why would
Because
I want
it's
to
a
do
fixed
that?
deposit. Why did
Oh,
I
it's
break
it's
the
fixed
fixed
deposit.
Yeah.
It's getting me some interest.
Yes, it's getting me some interest.
Uh-huh.
And then I see, okay, can I use that fixed deposit to borrow some short-term
Okay.
overdraft? The bank will approve it as you stand there. Because that one,
Yeah.
the risk is zero.
Yes.
So understand the security the bank is looking for or the institution is looking for is the nearest to cash
Right.
and equivalent to what I lent you. So look at your security. Be sure you may part with it. A lot of people don't think that you may part with it.
Quite quickly.
Discuss with the family. And that's why today the law is such that if you are to take a property to take to the bank, madam must sign. Because you don't want to see fellows there and family didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, when you have a security, discuss it with the family that I want it as a security. Know that there is a risk it can go, so evaluate the opportunity very, very carefully. Knowing that the lender is not the enemy, but he has to also account
Yeah.
for what he did with the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, you just said that is so well explained, isn't it? Eh? And I hope you have all had that chance to learn, because I really have learned. And we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we can explore more about borrowing. Thank you so much, guys. Stay with us.
There's not a friend in all the earth like you, Almighty God. There's nothing that can separate me from your mighty love. No, there's not a friend in all the earth like you, oh God. And there's nothing that can separate me from your love, no. Let nothing take me far away from you, Jehovah, Lord, I pray. Jesus, every day, let nothing take me far away from you, Jehovah, Lord, I pray. Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Where would I be without your mercy and love? Lord, where would I be without your grace? You show me mercy that I do not deserve, and your goodness I will not forget. Oh no, no, so let nothing take me far away from you, Jehovah, Lord, I pray. Let nothing take me far away from you, Jehovah, Lord, I pray. Jesus, every day I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Yes, Jesus, every day I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Oh, Jesus, every day I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Lord, Jesus, every day I'll pick up my cross and follow you. For I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, may follow you every day. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, may follow you every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, may follow you every day. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, may follow you every day. Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Oh yes, Jesus, every day, I'll pick up my cross and follow you. Oh Jesus, every day, I'll pick up
it's so nice to welcome you back. Thanks for staying tuned. And we want to pick up from where we left. Today we are talking about money sense or common sense part 2, and we have focused on borrowing. And maybe we have a few comments.
Yes.
Right.
I want to just thank you for those who have joined us. Kafi, Karibu Sana. We have Gladys Washira, Karibu Sana as well. Andrew Mwau, who's also a top fan. And we have Sunyanju and Grace Kavesu, Karibuni Sana. We have a couple of questions and comments. So there are 2 questions. I'll read them through. So one is saying, Andrew is loving the conversation. So he asks, I also think that many young people are subject to the black tax, where they have to take care of their parents and siblings. Saving might be a bit more difficult. So how do you get out of the debt hole? The second comment and question is, some years back I read somewhere that God's debt policy is no debt policy, implying that believers should never borrow, that if there is ever something one needs to borrow, money in order to do or buy regardless of what it is, it can wait. In fact, it must wait until you have the money for it, ama ikae, and contentment be embraced. So what's your take on that? And I hope you can touch on the help issue. It is sometimes forced on students, honestly. Yes, I'm one of those ones. Help has become one of the many trails that we keep pulling everywhere. Yeah.
So now on to the first question. Is that black tax or blood tax?
Said black.
Both can work.
Both can work. Anyway, so that's a very, very valid question, which is a reality for all of us. At some point, you need to take care of either one, or most of us, a relative or the other, to make sure that at least, and it is required of us, honestly, even to ensure that even our family and immediate and extended at least are comfortable and well taken care of. You don't want to see a family member suffering. So, but one of the things that I would advocate or recommend, even as you're taking care of those family members, do an allocation for them. And that allocation, whatever allocation that you do, let's say it's out of the 30,000 that you have, and you allocate maybe 5,000 or 10,000 out of it, you can still have a proportion that goes towards, at least you're saving a little bit, even if you'll save maybe much less, maybe 5,000 or 6,000, but at least have that sort of allocation where you can say maybe 5,000 will go to the family, and 5,000 will go to saving, and then maybe 2,500 will go towards paying off a debt if you already have a debt in place. Or split it 3 ways, where you can say maybe 5 out of my salary will be going to
all this.
Yes, to the family members, a bit for saving, because you need that for your future, and 5,000 towards paying off your debt if you already, and especially if you're in a help situation where the reality is you have to pay off. Though you can also renegotiate to see whether how you can extend the repayment so that it's also affordable on your part, so that you can see how do you balance out where your immediate needs are. You need to pay your rent, you need to pay, some costs. Yeah, so how can you reduce those expenses? So that once you have reduced your own personal expenses, it leaves you with some money where you can support your family member with some portion, a bit towards your future savings, and some bit towards the repayment of your loans. So I think it's a balancing act. And as you said, when it comes to borrowing, you want to ensure that wherever that you borrow, that you're paying the least interest. Yes, or rather the least interest, and you can also make sure that you can repay it as fast as possible. But there's always that flexibility to see how can you extend if you must, depending on what that means, depending also on your needs right now. But yeah.
Okay. So one of the greatest things that ever happened to me is meeting my wife here and her family. It's very organized. They do have a family circle. And one of the benefits is that those kind of challenges where you have children taking care of their parents is managed very, very well. And the way it works is that I can actually secure a parent or a relative to take some fund from the circle and go and apply it to some a productive activity, which I think the best way to take care of somebody is to train them and connect them. Connections and training are what my money should help you, so that I have given you the fishing rod to go and get the fish.
Right.
So they have that instrument, which is a circle, a family circle, which then an individual can go to without necessarily leaning on me. But I understand not everybody in that space. So what you want to do is that every time you have a relative or somebody who you have to support, whatever support you give, unless it's for a very short term, if you have to support somebody long term, find an activity you can invest in through your own capacity, maybe borrow, invest in it because you know about it. Use other resources such as your kazo, your other relative who's probably not fully engaged. Train them. Don't just tell them, simama hapo kwa butchery mtu akikuja ukate nyama. You know, no. Train them, take them, sharpen it to reduce the number of times the axe is trying to cut the tree. So sharpen the guy, take him to school, invest. If you realize this is going to be a long-term issue, cut your losses quickly. Take the guy to school, educate the cousin, be a butcher. Hapo ukikata nyama, when we, whatever we need to save for buying a cow, we have put away. Whatever is for running operations, we have put away. Whatever is for paying the loan, we have put away. The balance, let it take care of these obligations. That discipline, because you will only succeed with a lot of discipline and clarity and communication within that circle. So I'm happy that they have access, but if you don't, find a circle, find an institution that can lend you. But before you give anybody a penny, connect them to the right people and train them so that you don't have the liability of, they just come and ask me money. No. Your responsibility goes beyond just a handout. It goes to making sure that that handout will pay back. I think that's important. When you think of the number of people who, when you look at the NSSF, the pensions scheme in Kenya, it doesn't cover all Kenyans. And not everybody will have the opportunity to have a pension. So it's also good within your planning as a young person to look and see whether you'll actually need to have to support your family. Communicate it internally with a significant other, so you're not doing it kichini-chini. And those kind of things. And know that, yes, it is my responsibility, but to offload it soonest possible, I create a solid structure to manage that responsibility. But don't take the loan and just give them like Kwendeni. My mzee did that for some relatives of his for 20 years. And I thought maybe in the first year what you should have done is train them and then be involved to see what are they doing. Connect them. If they are going to sell wheat or whatever they are going to sell, are they selling to a reliable buyer? What is it? Be involved a bit. It may take 1 year of your involvement, but it will save you a lifetime of tears and blood, sweat, and tears, and some torn relationships.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And even before, it should be shared responsibility. I think this blood tax, sometimes you'll see that one child has taken it upon themselves to really support the family. And I think one of the things that I would say I'd learned from Alex is make it a shared responsibility amongst the siblings. Where is it only one child, one person? Even let the other siblings also pull together to come and create those structures so that at least it's a shared burden, so that at least there's development and people are uplifting one another. Yes.
Wow. I think that is very educative. I find that very good because most people find that it's too time consuming to invest in a training or equipping of a person than to just give a handout and they're off but they'll come again. But I find that very useful. I think I like that.
If you give your cousin to drive your Uber and he has not gone to driving school but you got him a driving license, what heartaches for yourself. what should have been your responsibility?
Yeah.
Yes, because the Uber is a good idea.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't give a guy who's not trained purely because he's your relative.
Your relative,
You
yeah.
have to ensure that the law is adhered to. The guy has the capacity to cause you less challenges. So those kind of things, you really just must develop that concept a bit further. Yeah.
And for the second question, which is how should Christians actually borrow, or should we just be content? As we said, it depends on what type of borrowing. If it's for consumption, clearly the indicators are all that. Save towards your consumption. Delay the expenditure so that you're able to save towards it. So it has to be from, is it necessary? Is it necessary for you want to be able to borrow? So I think it depends on what you're borrowing for. If it's for a business and you're well trained, as you said, well trained yet again, because there's very many people who go out there and borrow very quickly because they've come up with an idea. Ideally, start with your own capital so that at least when there's that learning curve, you can be able to, learn using your own capital, and you don't have somebody who's coming for your
Knocking at the
car or
door.
for your furniture or for something, so that they can be able to take back or get back their repayment. So ideally, initially start off with your own capital. And then if you've seen that the capacity has grown, you've mastered it, your skills are, much more better in terms of your management of the business, then you can go ahead and think about how do you actually borrow to be able to grow a business and to be able to grow your income and those sort of things. So I think it depends on what would be my take from a Christian perspective. Yes, because
Wow. Go ahead, Alex.
Just to wind up that space, there's somewhere, I think it's either Psalm 24 or thereabout. Ideally, when the discussion of borrowing comes in, in other places it will say the borrower will be a slave to the lender.
Yeah.
But I also understand the issue of talents. That there are some guys who are given talents, and those who are able to work them were able to generate something, and they were told to keep it true and faithful servant. If you are true and faithful with whatever has been given to you means it could have been lent to you. So I don't think it is a suicidal space. But what you need to build is also the knowledge that Psalms 24, thereabout 27, says, you should have built up your storehouse and generated an income before you borrow. So the precepts are there that yes, you can borrow to build your house or to do anything, because maybe you want to build it quickly. You don't want to be paying rent. At the same time, you have a house you're building. So maybe I figure I'll borrow, build it quickly, but I can repay because I have an income somewhere which is able to pay. So even though I took a loan, I can build the house quickly but pay it off. So the precept is that I have some income somewhere which is able to manage the borrowing, such that I will not be depending on a future where I don't know how I will pay, but because the opportunities are there now, and guys will be peddling loans everywhere, the opportunity is there. In fact, even in your own room, 24K from one of these mobile lenders is very quick, and then you buy a nice Shino, some nice clothes, and guys think something good happened to you. That nice clothing and everything should come from your income. But if you are investing the 24,000 into an opportunity, I decided now I'm going to buy ducks and then sell them, and that one is you are multiplying your talent, because you are using talent to generate value. That one is something I'd like to be very clear about.
Thank you so much. I think our time is moving pretty fast, and I think I would like us to talk a little bit about the cost, the true cost of borrowing. So, for example, if I borrowed some money, do I need to be aware of the cost of that money I've borrowed even before I borrow?
Yes.
Give us a good scenario of how to be aware of the cost of money before we go into borrowing.
Okay. So that's a fantastic question that requires some very clear reflection. First of all, when you borrow, the person who's lending to you must have considered that alternative use of the money is not as good as lending to person Y. So it must be able to compensate the other person. So it will be above inflation, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So when you borrow some money, the first thing they have to think is, I have to get a better rate than giving the government. So
Right.
for example, it will be higher than the treasury bill.
bonds,
So that is the foundation. It will be more than 6-7%. Okay. Then I have to add in the cost of administering this thing. So then they put administration. Then they think, how risky are you to give money? You know, this venture you are in. So you'll find there are people who they've put in 6-7% because of the comparative rate. Then they've put an administration cost, maybe 2-3%. Then now from there we start quoting against the country risk. Kenya politics, this guy, how risky is he to give money? So that cost could be anywhere, another 3-5%. So you have 6, which is the base.
You have 4.
7, then you have another 4, you
Yeah.
are at
Wow,
about
wow, wow, wow.
10.
Yeah.
Then, of course, then he starts putting country risk, he starts another 4-5, that's 15.
Yes.
But then also now when we evaluate, hey, this guy, what's his experience on paying, we don't know. So you might find the premium now is somewhere 2 to 5%. So your rate will be anywhere, 14 all the way to 17% in the same bank, but because of your previous experience, the country you are in America, for example, the rates are anywhere 3-4%. Because the country risk is low, the ability to assess your capacity to pay is very, very high.
Yeah.
So those there is a financial cost. I'm describing the financial cost. Plus, there will also be some legal costs within, because they have to put a lawyer.
Yeah.
You've got to get an insurance on it, because they are like, if you run, we have to go to somebody else to pay this loan. So they have to secure the loan. So all those costs, when you talk of 17%, there are also zingine huku chini ya fungua mkopo, which are somewhere in there, which you need to be aware of, because the company also has to insure against the loan. But I think the more critical one is psychological. Because every time my boss passes by my desk and I think there might be a pink slip, your stress kwanza starts with the loan, not even losing the job. Starts with the loan.
Yeah.
So to avoid the psychological space, make sure that you've kind of also secured yourself in a way that that loan, I may have an asset or something else that can quickly pay it off.
Yeah.
So that is very important. Before you borrow, think if things went haywire,
Yeah.
how would I
How could
offload
we
that
fall back
debt?
plan, yeah.
Personally, when I was comfortably being given a very cheap loan, I didn't think much of the offloading. So
Which is a space most people are in.
when because getting the loan was the easiest thing in my life. I mean,
Yeah.
it was easier than combing my hair.
Yeah.
I was there and, my desk mate says, if you just are over here, you can be given some money.
Yeah.
And I mindlessly just signed some paperwork and another paper and another. This pen is so easy to finish the world with.
Oh, yeah.
So I finished
And
my
the place
world
to
in
sign
one
has a
strike.
star, so sign here.
Yeah. And then one day I mindlessly again told my employer I have found my way.
See you when I see you.
Yeah, I can sail from here by myself. And of course the income from my other ventures did not come as swiftly. That's when you start remembering, actually there is a paper I signed somewhere. And they are knocking the door and calling all your in-laws and everybody, and I'm under the table. That psychological cost was too much for
I
a
think we need
grown-up.
to agree, banks
Yeah.
must never call in-laws.
They must collect.
Collection,
So
collection is collection.
but it is very unfortunate,
It must
honestly.
be collection.
Yeah, I think that
Because
should
they
be
have
the
to
way
explain to the
rules.
shareholders, where
Yeah.
did this Alex guy go? I think he was reliable, now he's not reliable. Call the other guys who can convince him to
Come,
pay.
we need him here.
So, the reality is that it's a very heavy cost, the psychological cost. A pikipiki ikipita hapo nje kwangu, at some time the auctioneers did show up. We had quite a bit of a conversation, and I know they have the upper hand.
Yeah.
So, nimenyenyekea in front of my children, mambo ambayo hutaki kufanya, so it was a lesson for me. But today I have the discipline to disclose domestically any ideas, wild or otherwise, that I might have.
Yeah.
but sometimes it's something that, when I listen, there's a video which was being shared, and a gentleman was saying the greatest challenge with this loan is I have to go and disclose it domestically. Not even that the auctioneer is onto me, it's that I have to disclose it domestically. I could understand the person.
So the stakeholders in the family are the most difficult to explain to.
Utalala nje. So, the psychological cost is heavy, but there is a financial, there is legal costs, there is costs on the family as well.
Cost,
administration costs, those you have to bear in mind.
Wow. Well, we have a few seconds to do a real situation.
Okay.
For example, I go to the bank, or somebody in our congregation has gone to the bank and borrowed 10 million. What's the cost of that 10 million in 10 years?
Well, in 10 years, so you're talking of if you did an amortization table, the table that says, the first 5 years you'll just be paying mainly interest. And it's right, because you should be aware that it's the bank is not giving money for free. So you'll be paying anywhere, in 10 years you'll be paying double or just slightly more than double the amount you borrowed. At an average rate of 12 to 14% any 10 years, you will be paying, so you are talking of what? Upwards of 20-some million paying back. So when you're pricing in the value of the asset you are acquiring for 10 million, it's not necessarily 10 million. It's actually the value of what you're paying the seller plus what you're paying the financier, who's the bank. So those two numbers are what really come up to your actual cost of acquisition. So it will be maybe that loan you think is, that asset is 10 million. You're talking of it upwards of 20s towards 30 million. It's something that you have to really consider, because if you are to take the 10, you must be clear how much will you pay back. It's 20-something. So I must be sure that when I'm offloading or when I say I'm happy to have it, it must be 30, 40, 70 in value. So that clarity you must have, and consult somebody before you make that decision.
Thank you so much. And are you guys available to be consulted outside
Are
here?
we to pick our hands up?
Yeah.
For one, I am.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys, that you're available for our people to come to you and ask a complicated question like that, do the math, then the decision can be made.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that's all we have had time for today. And I want to thank you so much for making the time to come and investing in educating us as a congregation. We are so grateful. Karibuni sana tena. We will call you again. We wanted to capture a few of the thoughts we said, that you must be disciplined. That word discipline, we've used it more than almost 10 times today. A lot of times, because discipline is so important. And then communication. We must communicate our intentions, our financial intentions, whether it's loans, debts, whatever it is, to our significant others. Stakeholders in our family. That's important. And then we said, we want to make this a shared responsibility. Support for family members, for siblings, for relatives. Make it a shared responsibility, so that the burden is not so heavy on just one person. And that's a good thing. And then support structures. For any money, that money that we borrow, it must have a structure to support it, so that it can bring something. That's what I got from today. And I think that was it was amazing. It was amazing. And I want to thank you so much for staying tuned, staying in. And make sure you don't leave this place the way you came. And make sure you let others know that money doesn't have to control us. We can control it, right? We can manage it, and we can grow it. I think the bottom line, we should be able to grow that money and manage it well, to the glory of God. So thank you so much. Charity, thank you so much too for sharing with me. Alex and Bella, and the entire Moran Capital family, we thank you so much for your availability and the time. My name is Maggie Moher, and it was a joy hosting you today. Blessings, bye.